Hello and welcome to In Conclusion. I'm Keyshan Haynes. Well, Trinidad and Tobago, we may have completely lost it because we've gotten to the point where I'm actually longing for the days of tit for tat and dog for cat as the big story of the week. But let's get started. So I've taken a decision that I'm going to start calling out the bloggers who blatantly attack our journalists. You know, it's okay if you criticize our work, that's fine, but attack us personally and you're going to be exposed. So someone with the profile name Jason Lewis uploaded a vile video in an attempt to disgrace investigative journalist Asha Javid. The video from 2013, which was removed from YouTube for violating its guidelines on privacy and the portrayal of minors, was shared by another blogger who's been harassing Asha. Her name's Vivica Jordan, and another one, Ronaldo Matadine, who has repeatedly called her a PNM operative, whatever that means. Now, the Association for Caribbean Media Workers has condemned the repeated attacks on female journalists, and these attacks are now starting to come from other journalists. The Express reported earlier this week that an employee of CNMG's 91.1 FM has actually been repeatedly attacking Express columnist Suniti Maraj. So we are calling on CNMG CEO Ken Ali to do something and condemn these attacks. The Express also wrote a scathing editorial on Thursday which said in part, quote, "We hold our press freedom as our sacred trust and we are prepared to respond to any threat to this vital element of our democracy." On Wednesday, political parties re-signed a political code of ethical conduct. Section 3.4 of that code says, political parties must take steps to ensure that journalists are not subject to harassment, intimidation, threat, or assault or by them or any of their representatives or supporters. So, of course, that means you, bloggers, because your own political leaders are condemning your actions.
And we would have seen earlier this week that a political supporter would have posted pictures of Asha Javid, a journalist, and attacked Asha Javid personally, and that seems to be the norm of attacking journalists.
I want to say that must be condemned in all forms. The media must be protected, but we need the media to protect us also by ensuring that stories are accurately reported, and when there's wrongdoing, for it to be fairly brought to the public attention.
So we know that the bloggers have been, coming out strong. Is there going to be some sort of condemnation of that on your side and the other?
We have stood firm on these matters, that decency in the public space, and with social media, difficult to contain as it is, but the leadership must send the signals to control these things.
So bright and early Monday morning, the police brought the country to a literal standstill with their total day of policing. They stopped anything on wheels, checking licenses, according to CNC3, checking dipsticks, according to probably false but hilarious social media posts. They were checking motorcycles for spare tires. The big question, was it a form of protest over stalled wage negotiations? Or the bigger question, who authorized it? The executive distanced themselves from it, but only after saying that they knew about it all along. And the question that many of us still have to ask the executive is, why did they wait until 11 o'clock in the morning to send the order to stop the roadblocks? What happened between 5 a.m. and 11 a.m.? And then why was the Minister of National Security the one who had to call off the other roadblocks that were allegedly planned? Of course, the Commissioner of Police does not answer to the Minister. But now the police are saying that they're going to launch yet another investigation that I'm sure they're going to work assiduously on. And hopefully they're going to put a solid 2 weeks of policing to get to the bottom of this. But after a total day of policing, fewer than 20 persons were arrested, and that's probably because social media blew up over this story. Complaints, memes, warnings to stay home. So, of course, if any criminals were on Facebook, I'm sure they knew to stay away. But speaking of social media warnings, CNC3's Deputy Head of News, Samson Nantum, got himself into a little bit of hot water when he tweeted on Tuesday, quote, "I knew about yesterday's police activity since Friday and I warned my friends and family. Strange that the police executive didn't seem to know." Now, what seemed like a little tongue-in-cheek comment, maybe him just being a little too cocky, he was called out by former Mirror editor turned PNM candidate Maxie Cuffey, who said that he had a responsibility to tell the public. And maybe he should have reported on it, but on one hand, what if he reported on it and he was wrong? Then he'd be blamed for giving wrong information. And if he was right, he might have ruined a legitimate police exercise. So the real lesson here is that our tweets don't go into a vacuum. People are always scrutinizing us. So as journalists, we should always be on our best behavior. All right, let's move on. On Wednesday, the government brought a motion of no confidence against the leader of the opposition, which Diego Martin Northeast MP Colm Imbert called, well, you can see what he called it.
Mr. Speaker, this motion is frivolous and vexatious. This motion is childish. This motion has no basis. This motion has no purpose. This motion is empty. It is vacuous. It is tenuous. It is absurd. And Mr. Speaker, I am not staying in this parliament to continue this foolish debate. I am leaving now. We're getting out of here. You could say what you want. Whatever you have to say. Whatever you have to say. Say it outside.
And if you thought that there was action inside the parliament, clearly you had to be outside. Now, everyone, you loved this story of political supporters being brought in by the busload, and they weren't even sure why they were there. This is Jabari Fraser's story.
Do you know what is being debated in Parliament today?
Well, everything good. Everything good. Everything good.
So, do you know what's being debated in Parliament?
Well, we want to be in the country right now.
I support Kamala.
Do you know what's being debated in Parliament?
Yeah. What to support the Prime Minister?
Where are you from?
From Pinal.
Do you know what is being debated in Parliament today?
Well, sort of, yeah.
What is being debated?
Ask them now.
And this isn't the first time we've seen this from political reporters. Do you remember the crowds that were outside the parliament for the Constitution Amendment Bill debate last year? They were from both the UNC and the PNM.
Supporting the bill. But why are you supporting the bill? This affects your life. So you have to say why you're supporting the bill. Run the race up it.
All right, now I see why people confuse Jabari and me. But a note to anyone bringing political supporters out to your party. Oh, God, get them a pamphlet or something and let them read up first. All right, and finally this week, the politicians have officially declared that there will be no debating of real issues in this election. So I guess we'll have to get them in 2020, because from this week, we went from a discussion to a banner to who has the stinkiest mouth in the Caribbean to...
This young girl was then raped by her father's best friend. The product today is the aspirant to lofty office.
Alan Toppin in Parliament. You know, you have to give her credit for uniting the nation, though, because very rarely do you see Trimbagonians actively coming out and strongly condemning just about anything. And I'm talking pure anger here. No memes, no funny tweets, no snide remarks, just outright condemnation. And everyone from newspaper editorials to a Change.org petition that's asking for her to be removed, the network of NGOs, former Speaker of the House, Barry Sinanan, who said that she should have been stopped by the current Speaker, Wade Mark. Right now, the only people who have been silent are, well, the Prime Minister and Chairman of the UNC's Women's League, Stacey Rupnarine, who actually sat inches away from her and you know, last week was going off about a comment on dogs and cats. Anyway, it's all good because she offered a very heartfelt apology.
She said, quote, "I intend to stand my ground and will insist that questions that have been asked of the leader of the opposition must be answered." Mrs. Elaine Toppin concludes her statement by saying, quote, "I will not allow Dr. Rowley to use public outrage to hide from the duty he has to answer these questions and put deep, frightening suspicions to rest once and for all."
Yeah, so I guess that's no real apology there. Apology in part, I guess, as she said. Needless to say, Rhea Tate from The Express found Garth Allen's mother, and who said that this whole story is a complete lie. But let's not forget that when politicians throw mud at each other, sometimes innocent bystanders get dirty. As CNC3's Goldie Bruce tells us, you never know how the words that we in the media repeat to you, the public, can have an impact.
In the message that you sent to me, you used the word hate. You said, "I hate her."
I really did at that point in time. I really did, because it's hard to forgive something like that. It's hard to forgive people being so callous and cold and uncaring and unfeeling.
We'll be right back. This is In Conclusion. All right, welcome back. So forget the general elections for a little while. When the media holds an election, we're going to tell you the date up front. So April 11th, MAT members will vote for their new president. So I have on set 3 presidential candidates and 1 on the phone. We have Francesca Hawkins, anchor at CNC3, Sheldon Yearwood, head of news at Rain TV, Sterling Henderson, deputy head of news at 995.5 FM, and on the phone, Irvin Ward of The Guardian, editor at The Guardian. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody.
Good evening to you as well. Good evening.
All right, so the first question I'm going to ask is, the New Media Association president is essentially the Barack Obama coming in after George Bush. These terrible, terrible years, and now you're going to be required to fix everything. But you're also coming in at a time when there's a general election, when journalists are very much under attack. So what do we fix first as president of the association? Do you fix MAT, or do you jump right in and start protecting the journalists? Okay. I'll let you start, Sheldon.
We need to, good evening, all the viewers. We need to fix MAT. I'll take it from this perspective. As the media, before we address the issues of the public, we need to address our own internal issues, and we have a lot. Because you made reference earlier on in the program about journalists attacking journalists. That is a scary place to be.
Right.
And if it is that we are at that place where we're attacking our own, that's a concern to me. We also have on Facebook, every day, I make this an issue. Why it is we have journalists openly aligning themselves with political parties based on their comments on Facebook.
Right.
And what that tells me, it's a deeper sword than we're actually seeing, visually. Because what that says to me is that journalists are looking for a safety net. They're looking for a place to feel secure. So a lot of times it's easier to align yourself with a political party. Now, if MAT in itself would, how would I say, create an umbrella for their media workers, where they will feel safe, where they feel that their issues will be addressed, their issues will be counted, then therefore you wouldn't find this latching onto anything for some level of security, and now it's against each other. It's
a way you just sounded like a child joining a gang because it has no other friends or family.
Because when you hear the venomous comments, you read them, you have to wonder. And it's a concern to me.
Fran, I guess I'm posing the same question to everybody. So what do we fix first? Do we fix MAT, or do we fix the issues affecting journalists?
Well, they go hand in hand, Kijan. The whole complex that is the media environment involves public trust as well as professional confidence. On the subject of the kinds of Facebook and social media comments that Sheldon is talking about, this really is a question of personal and professional confidence of an individual journalist, and that's why it's particularly odious, because professional credibility is very much a vital value to the profession. And in all cases, the Media Association must defend persons who are under personal attack, because professional credibility is the lifeblood of our profession. And so on one hand, that must remain a top priority, vigilance and advocacy for press freedom, as well as ensuring that practitioners can operate in an environment where they are sure, often where authorities may turn a blind eye, that there will be a voice immediately pointing out, calling the authorities to address the matter. The question of the development of the organization continues hand in hand, but we can talk about that a little bit later.
I guess your opening remarks, this is just turned into a presidential debate. I love it. I love it.
Well, I would agree with both Sheldon and Francesca in that Francesca saying MAT issues are not separate to journalist issues is the truth. As an organization, you are charged with the responsibility of moving forward, and you deal with whatever arises as you move forward. You may set an agenda as an organization, but then be broadsided by events that would happen. Hopefully, we would have enough resources within the organization to be able to say, well, okay, our constitution reform agenda does not have to be shelved because we have to respond to something else. Or our fundraising efforts are not being affected because we're busy writing press releases. So ideally, MAT is an organization that works not just with an executive, but with an active membership willing to lend support. 7 people sitting down in a room at a meeting cannot carry an organization.
Right. And let's just get Irvin. I haven't forgotten you there, Irvin. Have you heard anything that you agree or maybe disagree with from the other 3 presidential candidates?
Well, I agree with some of what they've said. But in terms of looking at MAT itself, I think that education of journalists is one of the key goals that any executive is going to have to seek to achieve. The issue which Sheldon spoke to about Facebook conversations, we are having that conversation with young journalists all the time in terms of what you can and cannot do as a journalist. And some of these conversations which are being had on Facebook, some journalists do not understand that as a journalist, you cannot have those types of conversations. So we have to ask ourselves as an organization whether journalists coming into the profession understand exactly what it means to be a journalist as it relates to professionalism in the field. And some of them have not had a full grasp and understanding of what this means. And this is why we are having these kinds of issues on Facebook in terms of journalists attacking each other on Facebook.
So the question now becomes, what do we do about it? How do we fix the issues that we have? And of course, the big issue of MAT. We find ourselves in this position once a year. I'm not even sure how long a MAT term is supposed to last because we keep going back.
And that's in part why I decided to run for or to accept the nomination, because I thought to myself that MAT needs at least another term. And that is what I am looking at it as. I am not looking 15 years down the future and worried about the future of MAT. The future of MAT is right now. It needs to be taken care of right now so that there will be 15 years down the road.
And how do we get journalists to come out and do something?
The genesis of a lot of problems we have in society begins at the home, generally. So media needs to go back home. They need to go back home on how it used to be.
The challenge with that
social media has been... It has been, of course, it has opened up a door, but it has also opened up a Pandora's box.
Right.
And the thing is, we have not been able to close that box or actually manage that properly. So therefore, we have a lot of skewed views, and journalists find themselves getting caught up in the quote-unquote hype.
Right.
So we have to bring them back home to understand the core value, and agree with Irving there in terms of education. It is vital.
Keishan, you began by asking what are our plans for the association. And I would like to just put my position out. I'm looking at this in a 2-phased, some of which overlap, but initially the stabilization of the organization is critical. And that's a very short to medium term project that's ongoing at all times, but stabilization is critical. At this point in Trinidad and Tobago's annual calendar, we need an association that is on firm footing, moving from an association into an institution that is grounded in a solid, viable infrastructure, systems, and so on. But when I talk about stabilization, I would say there are 3 areas. First of all, we need to have monthly meetings in which the executive is accountable and seeks a renewed mandate
and make sure that they show up
from its membership. Second of all, I also want to see this 25 people that have put themselves up for office, all of us included. This is and Irving coming to us by telephone. Good evening again, Irving. This is a pool of talent that must be engaged. At no time should they be allowed to slip away. We need to engage, activate, and encourage immediate participation of that 25. Right there in those 25 people, we have a core group, which some would say is larger than a working group that we've seen in MAT for quite some time. And that is a critical pool of talent. And the other aspect to stabilization is the notion of the word commitment. This is a very important aspect. We come, we offer ourselves for office, we begin with commitment. But commitment is the long, hard road, and this is a cultural value that we must enforce and talk about. So I'm talking about those 3 points from a stabilization point of view. We also have to look at the development of the organization, institutional development. We've already had commitments, as my colleagues would know, at the last MAT meeting. Wesley Gibbons spoke somewhat and suggested that there would be, on this occasion, access to international funding, international training. And we have to remember that journalists are often pegged down in newsrooms, writing stories, editing, scripting. Questions of marketing, fundraising, education, event management. These are not necessarily our core skills, but it's always a good time to begin broadening the notion of what is an association of media professionals.
All right, hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break and be right back. This is In Conclusion. All right, welcome back. We're still with the 4 presidential candidates for the Media Association. Irvin is on the line. Irvin, you wanted to respond to something that Fran was saying just before the break. Oh, I guess we just lost Irvin.
Yes, but what I would say is that, of course, ahead of every election, it's easy to be idealistic. The reality of being on a MAT executive is, from my experience, a lot of times you have meetings and you have no caucus. A lot of times you find yourself looking at the Constitution and thinking our priority at this point really needs to be constitutional amendment. Because MAT needs to determine and define who is eligible for membership, 1, and 2, what it's going to be offering. I am not interested in a MAT that is a reactionary body that issues press releases when things happen, but when it calls for a critical mass, even if it's for a fundraiser or a social, you don't have that. On the executive, media people like us call the president, call the secretary for responses on issues. No one ever calls to say, do you need help with this? Do you have any projects happening that I can help with? It's not just an executive, it's an association. So it's part executive, part membership. We only see the membership when they come to vote. And then the friends of the people on the executive will support, but there isn't widespread support. We're not a homogenous group of people that...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that live in a sort of unified journalist world in Trinidad and Tobago. We're a bunch of working individuals with lives, and if those lives can converge around a particular issue under the name of MAT, I think that would be great, sometimes at least. All
right, Irvin, you wanted to respond to something Fran was saying before the break. We have Irvin back.
Well, I did, but Sterling is also touching on it, and that is commitment. The commitment to ensure that MAT survives, MAT thrives, MAT does what it's supposed to do, not only has to come from the executive, it has to come from the membership. We react each time. We have reacted over the last 2 years to executives either resigning or some issue happening. And we come out to the AGM and we vote. And after that, the membership disappears. The executive has no support and is called upon to do this job by itself. MAT cannot function like that. People have to understand MAT has to survive. We have far too many media houses in Trinidad for there not to be a MAT. And people have to understand the only way this can survive is if we are all committed to ensure that this thing survives and does what it has to do for us.
And in that all are editors, because I remember on our executive, we would have training sessions organized by the association featuring senior members of the fraternity, and you would think these are courses that would interest people. They're free, they're on a Saturday morning. You call up editors, you say, listen, we're having a workshop on this particular thing. Could you perhaps, ask some employees to come across and do the workshop? Some would commit, some would not commit, but at the end of the day, we would always have fewer people there than we expected. So the support not just needs to come from the voting membership, but also from the editors, who have to recognize the value of MAT and support its work.
All right, hold that thought. So that is the end of our television show, but we're going to complete this online. So if you want to see the rest of this show, log on to tv6tnt.com right now. It's already online. There's no In Conclusion next week. We're off for Easter break, but see us again in 2 weeks. So a new week of news begins right now. Remember, check us out online. All right, welcome back to the special extended online version of In Conclusion. Still here with the members, the potential presidents of MAT. So I'm going to start with Sheldon. You were listening to everything else you were saying, and we were talking during the break about skepticism. Journalists are skeptical of what MAT has done or what MAT can do. How do we fix that?
Okay, now, we have all established thus far, we've all agreed that there is a disconnect within the media. We've established that. So how do we fix that? I remember I was speaking at a youth club function with the police service. That was last week, right? And they were asking me to speak about journalism. So I made a point. I said, okay, what do you consider as rewarding in journalism? I said, so I mentioned some stories in the past. I mentioned about a woman who, a child was so very ill and living in this area, very poor and so forth. Another woman was 500 pounds and she had no help and cars would abandon her, family abandoned. I said, that is a reward. I think the media, we've been fed a false ideas about what journalism is today. It's about the money. The passion is now the money. We need to bring
I don't think anybody goes into journalism for money.
Well,
I hope not.
Well, they get fooled.
Somebody lied to them.
They get fooled when they enter. But the point is, there's the hunger for journalism is not there anymore. And that needs to return. And the thing is, because of that hunger for
Can I ask how as Matt you're going to do that?
Yeah.
Well, let me just put it this way. We mentioned about journalists attacking journalists, they're skeptical of journalists and so forth, right? We need to bring trust back, and it starts in society. In society itself, there's no trust in it. There's no trust anywhere you go. Not in society. If society itself, the better society, there's no trust, then there'll be no trust in our associations. There'll be no trust anywhere it will actually.
So this is a life mission. You have to bring trust back to society to save Matt.
I really trust on a whole.
Yes. Well,
well,
first of all, I think in the context of what we're discussing here, the executive has to trust each other. If you don't have a cohesive executive,
how would they do that?
Well, I think one way of doing it is by getting an executive in place and looking at the election structure that surrounds Matt, considering slates, as opposed to having disparate executives where two people might end up on the executive who have a genuine hate for each other.
Right, and therefore they need to start trusting each other. Now, how do they do that?
No, but these are human beings.
Not trust in terms of they need to love each other, but again, that mutual respect.
I have been in environments on executives where there is no room for that. There are people, we talk about journalists attacking other journalists. Right. The hate is real out there for some people. And if you end up with an executive of people who don't get along, then you're not going anywhere. You're going to crumble.
That is a very important point. But again, it comes back to longer-term questions of organizational development. All the issues of the Constitution, the modus operandi, all of these are matters that must be taken back to the membership as we move forward for reassessment of the Constitution, reassessment about our internal structure, as you rightly point out, difficulties with the executive. And very important is the voice of the membership. While you're saying that the experience is 7 people will get there and very little is heard after from the membership, unless this changes, and these 25 people, in my view, who have put themselves up for nomination are brought together and engaged, we must begin with what we have. You suggested that I was idealistic. I took that as a compliment, Sterling, because hope shines eternal. Because at the end of the day, we are Trinidadians and Tobagonians. We understand each other. And to a large extent, we must, because this institution, this association is so important to both the profession and, most importantly, our public, who are relying on us for accurate information with integrity. We need to keep speaking with our people. Irvin mentioned education. It's all part of it. But as I said, in the short term, stabilization, re-establishment of the organization, and as we move forward, the wider question of organizational development and training for members of MAT, not only in media and journalism, but in the wider skill set of organizational development, the marketing, many of the complex areas, because this is a pool of talent we have to draw on. So in the 21st century, journalists can't only be writing and editing and recording, they must also have a fair grasp about organizational management.
All right, Irving, is Irving there?
That's a
No, we lost him again. All right, but I'll give everybody the final words, 30 seconds. Sure. Why should we vote for you, Sheldon?
All right, now one thing I've learned being the head of news at WIN TV is that I also my reporters bring with them their personal, how should I say, the challenges that they have. And I think what we need to understand is that journalists, they're people. And they come with challenges. Matt needs to be in a place where they are like a family to journalists. It's like a home. It must feel like a home, not just as this organization with a whip over their head and just, as they say, reacting every minute. It must be a home for journalists where they feel comfortable to address their issues so they don't have to resort to going on blast on social media.
All right, still in 30 seconds. Why should we vote for you?
I don't know why you're going to vote for me. I can't promise you anything, I'll tell you that much. But I do know of a legacy of an organization that once had a scholarship fund, that held annual awards, that had fundraising media-based fashion shows that attracted scores and scores of attention and people. And so I have a sense of what Matt is capable of doing. I, like Sheldon, would like to think that going in with the executive, it is not my vision that we are here to execute, but our vision. And starting with the hour of the executive and the hope and prayer that we can, if elected, get along and work cohesively to advance the organization as far as we could.
Fran, 30 seconds.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Irvin. I know we're just down to the last few minutes. Again, I would like to encapsulate that I would see my role and the role of an executive. If people would like to join that executive, I would see this as very much a facilitatory kind of executive. The advocacy of press freedom and freedom of expression. We have many, many talented people who can form an advisory group within it. I don't see entirely that the executive needs to be the ones entirely doing the press releases. Obviously, everything would have to pass through the executive for final release. But there must be ways in which the intellectual and talent capacity can be drawn on. A strategic plan, budgeting, associating, fundraising internationally and locally and regionally. I would like to be, again, maybe a bit idealistic steering, but I would like to think that at the end of 2 years, we could leave the association in better financial footing and with a secretariat in place, even if it's a shared secretariat with a like-minded association, as is done in Jamaica. And I think we must be optimistic.
All right, that's it. Thanks very much. The special online edition of In Conclusion. March elections are April 11th, so be there and get out and vote. In Conclusion is every Saturday night at 7:30. I'm Keishan Haynes. Good evening.